Hello. How's everybody doing? Hi. So thanks for coming to this session. It is an introduction to the +1 button. If that's what you're here for, you're in the right room. If it's not what you're here for, you're in the wrong room. These are some bits of information that you might be interested in. There's a hashtag for this session, publisher and IO 2011. And there's also a link for feedback about this session. I'd love to hear what you think. And there's also a link for where this session is going to live after today. All right, so this is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the +1 button. And specifically up top is what's now, which is the +1 button on search. Then we're going to talk about the +1 button on your site. That's what's next. We're going to go through getting started, some advanced options, and optimization. And of course, at the end, I will answer some of your questions. Please note that the +1 button on your site is not yet launched, and will not be launching today. But I'm giving you a first peek about what that'll look like and how you'll be able to integrate it on your site. Sound good? All right. Now, I'd also like to say that integrating the +1 button on your site is super easy. So this is going to go pretty quick. This is me. I'm a developer advocate at Google, and you can find me online. Also, feel free to @mention me. All right, so let's start with what's now. I'm going to give a little bit of background around the +1 button and why we decided to create it. There are a couple different sharing methods that we looked at out there in the world. One of them is email. I think we're all familiar with email, right? It's an interesting medium because it is super high value. When you write an email to somebody, they receive that personal information from you and that personal endorsement. But it's also really high effort. It takes some time to write names in that to field and craft a message just to those people. So there's another way to share, activity streams. Now, this is also really common. It's super easy to share to an activity stream, very, very low effort. But in general, for endorsements, it's pretty low value. It's great for breaking news or sharing funny videos, things that aren't time sensitive or time specific. But when I am looking for a toaster oven, I may not have seen this message because perhaps Cami Crape wrote it a month ago. So when those things match up, it's like magic, but it hardly ever happens. So we've got this one method that's low effort and relatively low value for endorsements, and we've got this other method that's really, really high value, but also high effort. How do we put the two together so that we have something that's low effort, but also really high value? And that, of course, is the +1. So let's take a look at this. You can do this on your own. You can play the home game by going to google.com/experimental and opting into the search experiment. And you'll start to see +1 buttons on your search results page right away. And this is what it will look like. I did a quick search for King Day books. And I got this great article by the Huffington Post on books that I could read to commemorate Martin Luther King Jr. Day. This is, as you'd expect, it's a search engine results page with links and snippets. And there's now a +1 button just to the right. I wonder if I have a laser pointer. Ooh, I do. They're fun. So that +1 button is what you'd hit to take the +1 action. But there's this other new thing, and this is the value. It's that annotation right below the result. Say you're looking for the same you're doing the same search, and you come upon this page, and you see this annotation, your good buddy, Timothy, recommending that article for you. Notice how it looks different than every other result on that page. I got some numbers, too. It turns out 90% of consumers trust recommendations from their friends. And 71% say friends and family influence their purchase decisions online. So we know that these annotations are really powerful, and they make your result stand out. So it's super high value, right? It's also super low effort. It is one single button. It's just one click, and you add your recommendation to that link. And it looks like that. It just lights up, and you're done. Pretty cool, huh? Oops. It's also available on paid results. So you'll see on the ad here, we also got a +1 button and an annotation under that. Now, we think these annotations are going to be great. That they may increase CTR, your click-through rate, on both paid and organic listings. And something publishers tell us time and time again is that traffic from google.com is typically more valuable. It spends more time on their site, and it is more likely to convert. And we think that that's going to even increase with the +1 button, as the user not only comes from this unique place on the internet, but also with a recommendation. Cool, so that's the +1 button. Many of you may have seen that already. Let's talk about what's next. +1 button on your site. So I followed that link, and this is the page that I got. It's the Huffington Post page, but you'll notice there's something new. Down there by all the sharing links, you'll see a +1 button. It's off in the lower right. Yeah? Clicking this button is easy. It's just a button click. The count increments, and you've added your recommendation to this page. Now, why would a button need to be on the website as well? Well, it turns out we've gotten a lot of feedback from people after we introduced this search experiment, that they might not know that they want to add their endorsement to something when they're in the search engine results page. But when they go to your site and they see what it's all about, then they're maybe more likely to click that +1 button. And the great thing about this is that on this search engine results page, you may have clicked on an organic result. I may have clicked on a paid result. And Rebecca may have clicked on your site, and it all goes to the same annotation. So let's do some stuff, shall we? It's a developer conference. How about we look at some code? I'm afraid there's not a lot to look at because it's super simple. We've got 2 tags. We've got a script tag right up there at the top. Just includes the script that's going to replace the tags on your page. And we've got the +1 tag. And it looks like this. Using all the default options, we don't need to add any attributes. And that tag will just get replaced by the script with a button. There's also going to be an HTML5 equivalent to this tag, so that you'll be able to validate your pages easier. This is what a basic page looks like. Yeah? Same script, but we've added the surrounding tags that are on the page. Of particular interest up at the top is the rel canonical. Put this here for a couple of reasons. First off, you're probably already using rel canonical. Actually, I'm a little curious. Who is using rel canonical in the audience? All right. Who's not using rel canonical? That should be everybody else raising their hands. Or maybe you're too embarrassed to. You really should be using rel canonical because it tells Google what the true URL of your page is, which often differs from the address in the address bar. The address in the address bar often has state variables, right? You get that question mark, state equals something or other, that don't actually represent the true URL, but are difficult to strip out. So you can tell Google what is the true URL of this page by specifying rel canonical. And you get to tell the +1 button what URL it should +1. And then, of course, here's that script again. So let's take a look at this. I have a cool thing to show you. Super excited about. This is a prototype of our +1 button configuration tool. And when we launch, you'll be able to go to this tool and configure a +1 button for yourself. This is how it works. See the +1 button? Boom. Now it comes in a number of different sizes, and you'll see down here is the script. In my example, I included the script and the tag together, but you'd probably want to put the script somewhere else, like in your head or right before the body closes. And it has the +1 tag. And you'll notice, even as I add these options, and I'll go through these in some more detail, even as I add these options, the snippet stays really, really simple. You can even do things like pull away the count and add the count back in. It's fun. So that's that. Let's get back and let's dive a little bit deeper into some of those advanced options, shall we? First off, +1s are for URLs. And it's got to be a public URL. Otherwise, it's not going to work. +1s are a public action, so they need to operate on public URLs. And the URL is determined by one of 3 things, and in this order. First, we're going to look at the href attribute of the +1 tag. If it's there, we're going to +1 that URL. Now, you would use this attribute if, let's say you're on a blog homepage, and you've got several different articles, and you want to put a +1 button by each one of those articles. And that +1 button should +1 the URL of that article. you would specify that URL in the href tag. The next thing that we look for is rel canonical. I've already talked about that. And then the third thing we look for is the URL of the page, as you would see in the address bar, document.location.href. Now, of course, we much prefer rel canonical over this because, again, it might not represent the true URL of the page, and it would be sad to have some of your users plus one their particular URL and other users plus one their particular URL, and they look like different plus ones. So rel canonical is good. All right, I got a table, because tables are important. This is a table of plus one buttons. As you can see, we have a number of different form factors. We've got small, we've got medium, we've got standard, and they all come with or without a count. And we've got the tall button. And the standard, of course, is a really common size that fits among other buttons of similar sharing type. All right, size and count are as what you'd expect. They get to specify what the size is and whether or not it has a count. And then we have two other attributes here. href I've already talked about. Callback I haven't. We're going to provide a callback so that when the user hits the plus one button, a function in the global JavaScript namespace on your page can be called. And this can be really great because perhaps you have identity on your page. A user's already logged in. You could perhaps track their plus ones on your site to their identity and maybe use that to improve their experience. All right, here are some parameters for the script tag. And we've got two. First off is language. You'll be able to specify other languages for the button. The second one is parse tags. This gets a little bit more interesting. By default, it's on load. So all the tags will be parsed at on load of the page. But you can also specify explicit, which means you get to specify when those tags get parsed. And you can do that one of two ways. The most common way you would do this is with .go. And .go takes a single parameter. That parameter is some ID of a container. Now, what you might use this for is, let's say you have a really large page, but your plus one buttons are only maybe in the article div. Then you can specify the article div, and the script will only scan through that content. The script will have to scan less content, and it'll run faster. You might also do this if you don't want the buttons loaded on load. You want them maybe a few seconds after. Maybe your page has some fancy performance stuff that makes more sense. The second way you would use this explicit parse tag is through render. And you would do this typically if you had an Ajax-y page. Let's say the user switched the content on the page, but didn't reload a page in their browser, and you needed to put a new plus one button there. You could use the render method that would then render the plus one button in the specified container with those specified parameters. You don't need a plus one tag. So let's take a look at a couple examples. This is the explicit load. And you'll see on here I've highlighted both the script up at top, which includes the plus one script. And down there we have the basic plus one tag that specifies where the button should go. And then below there I just added a script and I hit .go. And this would work. Obviously this is not a perfect example, it's a basic example. You would probably want this .go in an onload handler, and you would want to specify a subdiv. And here's another example. This is using render. Notice that the plus one tag is not on the page. Instead, I have a div called the plus one div there, down a third line from the bottom. And I have an onload specified in the body tag. That function calls the .render on that div. Default options, totally works, great. Does this all make sense? You guys are so easy. I don't know if that's because it makes sense or if you're all using your new tablets. I hope it's because it all makes sense. All right, let's talk a little bit about optimization. And this is all about improving your traffic and your engagement on the site. And to do that, you need to be able to measure it and experiment. And you got to try different things to make it better. So we'd like to provide data to you to be able to do that. Now I'm going to show you some early product mocks. It'll probably look different. But this will give you an indication of where we're going with something inside of Webmaster Tools that will give you data on the plus one button. First off, we have activity. We'd like to be able to provide to you a page that shows how often your content has been +1'd and on what pages. Pretty straightforward and cool looking. Search impact. This is going to tell you the difference in click-through rate for annotated results and non-annotated results. So you'll really be able to see the power and value of the +1 button on your site. We'd also like to provide anonymized user data, such as unique users and geo, where in the world these +1s are coming from. All right, I have a summary slide. Told you it was quick. Social connections may very well increase CTR on both paid and organic search listings. When users see that annotation, we think they may be more likely to click that result than any other. And research shows that that's probably true. Search traffic is pre-qualified through personal recommendations. So remember, publishers tell us traffic from Google.com often converts more than traffic from other sources. Add in a recommendation from my father to that, and I'm much more likely to convert. The +1 button on your site, +1 button on your site gives your users more opportunity to click. And that +1 from an organic result, from a paid result, or from your site, all goes to the same annotation on search. And finally, integration is straightforward and flexible. So what do you do next? First thing you can do is go to this form, google.com/webmaster/+1 button, and put down your name, and we'll send you an email as soon as this is available. And you can also go ahead and take a look at the +1 button on search. You can click a whole bunch of stuff and see how fun it is. Google.com/experimental. All right. So it was quick, a little quicker than I expected, but I hope it was fun. The hashtags, feedback, and session are there. We have microphones there, and I would love to hear your questions and perhaps feedback on this product.
Could you move that slide back?
What's that?
That slide, could you move it back, the one you had previously?
Yeah, sure. And go. There we are.
Thank you.
Could you use the microphone? I am told today my biggest audience is the internet. And that means that you need to use the microphone to ask a question.
I see that it's all done in JavaScript. It seems like that would be pretty easy to hack, where somebody could write a little script where every visit +1 the page, or they could write a script that gives them 1 million +1s or something like that. What is Google doing to prevent that?
A lot.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, you know, it's a concern. Abuse with any new feature is a concern, and it's something that we're taking seriously, and we are engineering solutions for. What those specific solutions are, I'm going to keep to those engineers.
And then the second one was it said names of people that had +1. Those are just people that are in your Gmail group or something like that?
That's a great question. So the people that appear on annotations for you are folks that are in your contacts, your Google contacts, which could be your Gmail contacts, any connected sites you've connected to your profile, and any publicly available social graph data that we can correlate with your identity.
And the last question is, would there be an opportunity to put a +1 external to your site, say in your emails or on another related page or something where I could see someone can +1 right out of the Google search results or off your page, but would there be a way to +1, say, off of emails you send or related pages?
It's an interesting question. I'm not sure what we're doing about cross-domain +1s, which I think sort of addresses that question. I don't have an answer for you on that, but I'm sure we'll have an answer soon. The interesting thing about email, though, is because email typically, even HTML emails, don't allow JavaScript. So even if you could put the +1 in an HTML email, most user agents aren't going to be able to render that button. But I think it is an interesting use case to have that +1 button on a variety of different sources.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
That's great. One quick question is: does the API allow the site to read the count information, or is that something you frame? And
That is a very good question. At launch, we're going to have a button that'll have the count in there. We may add that feature in the future.
But is the information framed, or can my site also read? If I have access to the DOM, can I read the count, or are you guys creating your own iframe and generating the count and the button in a frame?
I suspect, since the count is in the button and it's in an iframe, that you could do something fancy. But I think it would be more interesting if that was something that you really wanted to let us know on the Webmaster Forum, and perhaps we could engineer a more convenient way for you to do that.
Okay. More social plugins and things like this coming out afterwards for people that want to have, be able to surface content that have been the most +1 and things like this?
I would definitely be interested in hearing more about, like, specifically those kind of widgets that you would want. And perhaps, yeah, that could be cool.
Okay, thanks.
And let's go over here. Yeah. I won't forget about that side of the room.
Thanks. Actually, my question is more related to search. It looks like you guys have it set up as kind of a social construct right now. Do you have any plans to integrate it with the algorithm as far as the actual ranking of the sites is concerned?
Yes, so +1s may be a signal that we use in ranking.
Cool.
And it would be among over 250 other signals that we use in ranking.
I think that covers it.
Let me go back to this, just in case you need to live tweet any of this. Yes, let's take another one over there and we'll come back here.
Hi. How does the +1 sign operate when the user hasn't logged in? What does it do when there's no Google account?
Great. So a user does need a Google account and a public profile for +1s. It's a public action, so they need to be able to have their name publicly available. And if the user's not signed in, it'll ask them to sign in.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very simple sign-in flow and a simple onboarding flow as well.
So using your +1, you care about different people's influences, you said, You care a lot more for your dad. If he has his +1, he gave you a +1 versus one of your contacts that's way you don't really talk to a lot. Is there any way to prioritize which people have given +1s? Like if you have like 5 people you really care about, that if they've given a +1, it's more influential. Can you pick and have them added? Like I want these 5 people always, if they've given a +1, to show up.
That's a great point. And I think it's something that we've thought about. And obviously, we'd want to show annotations that matter the most to the user, right? And there's like sort of 2 things in there. One is that we're not going to show annotations for every result on the page, right? So we're only going to show them for the results that should matter to the user. And hopefully, the personal annotations, we get that so that that's the contact that matters the most to the user. And we'll use the data that we have available to try and do that. You want to go to the microphone? I would love to hear your question. Okay. Yes.
When do we get it?
What's that?
When?
When do you get it? I was waiting for that question. In a matter of weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you showed it on the Huffington Post site. Did you just mock that up, or they actually tested it?
I mocked that up.
Okay.
I took that into Photoshop and I did fun things with it. Do you like it?
I like it better on my site.
Feel free to tell them. Oh, I see.
You mentioned, callback functionality and that sort of thing. With social connections, are we as developers going to have any sort of access to that on our site to show, if you're on a page, hey, your dad liked this story, or, even broader, to have an actual page to say, here's what your friends liked on my site, that sort of thing?
So at launch, what you'll see is the aggregate annotation, which is the count, right? And we think that's powerful for users. If there are other things that you'd like to see, like if you'd like to see personal annotations on your site, then we'd definitely like to hear that. So Webmaster Tools Forum would be a great place to mention that. But of course, I'll remember as well. Thank you. Yes?
So hey, this looks a little similar to the like button on Facebook, so I'm just curious, what are the pros and cons? How does it compare in your view?
Okay, it's a good question. How is the +1 different than the like button that Facebook has? And I can't speak for Facebook, but I can speak for like my personal view of this. Yeah, and I think when I use the like button on the web, I like things that I want to be part of my identity, right? Because typically that shows up on my Facebook profile, and I love that. When I +1 something, I get a +1 anything that I like, then I'm publicly okay with saying, this is cool. But it doesn't have to be part of who I am. So that's how I would categorize the difference in my use case. Yes?
So what are you doing to differentiate this from, say, the buzz launch? Because I can see a public reaction to the names that appear. It seems a little similar, and I'm just wondering what your sort of PR stance is going to be, et cetera.
I can't speak to the buzz launch, but what I can say about the names that I think might interest you is that when we onboard the user, we're going to indicate to them clearly that their +1s are a public action. So when you +1 something, the whole world gets to know about it. So don't +1 something that you don't want the world to know. And as long as you're empowered by that, then there's less of a concern, hopefully. Also, the understanding that when they see annotations in search, they're seeing annotations from people in their contacts. So it'll be another indication to the user that this is a public action.
And you said this, so this is different than logging in. So you have to have a public page then?
So you need to have a public profile, a public Google profile. And if you don't want to have a public Google profile, then you don't have to use the button.
Okay.
But if you want to use the button, then you agree to have a public profile and have your name publicly associated with those +1s.
And have you gotten any sense of what the opt-in rate will be for users? Have you?
Hopefully fantastic. Yes?
Well, how do you +1? Let's say you +1 on something and you thought, oh, no, I don't really want to do that, or...
I was waiting for that question, too. There's all these ones that I'm waiting for. So when you +1, you hit the button. When you +1, you hit the button. Isn't that great? Oh, no, so when you hit the button, it +1s. If you hit it again, it'll undo that +1. Yeah, so when you hit the button, it'll turn blue. And when you hit it again to +1, it'll go back to its rest state where you see it. Thank you, Dan. Yes?
Why do you have to have a public profile, and will your +1s show up on your public profile?
So since it's a public action, and you're associating your public name with the +1 button, you need to have that name be public. If you don't have to have this public profile, you don't have to have the profile, but if you want a +1s, your name needs to be public. It's the whole value. As far as on your profile, you can opt in to have a tab on your profile of all your +1s. And you can actually take a look at how this is today. If you go to google.com/experimental and you sign into the search experiment, and you can go to your profile and you can opt into that tab.
Okay, and was the thought of you're having to have a public profile just one more signal that when you +1 you're doing something publicly, or is there more to it than that?
Well, part of having a public profile is having a public name. And part of doing a public +1 is having a public name. So they all require each other. Yes?
Are there any plans to add a -1 button?
None that I know of. Thank you.
Since it'll take time for the +1 button to roll out across several web pages, are there any plans to directly integrate the +1 button with the Chrome browser instead of the web page itself?
That's a really cool idea. I will take that back. So give me your idea, just a little bit more detail. You'd like the +1 button where?
Right, like as an extension on the Chrome browser, so that if you go to a site that isn't regularly updated or doesn't have a lot of social networking widgets already built in, you could +1 it without the web author having previously coded it.
So I don't have anything to say about that, but I think it's a cool idea.
Thanks.
Is that it? Those are all the questions? I feel so successful. All right, well, thank you all so much for coming. And if you'd like to ask a question of me privately after the session, I'll be hanging out for a few minutes, probably at least 30 of them. Thank you so much.